The Arizona sun punished the earth with a heat so intense it felt biblical, radiating off the cracked asphalt like waves rising from a furnace. Maya Torres stood beneath the only slice of shade the desert allowed, a rusted sheet metal awning that shivered whenever the wind dared breathe across it. Sweat gathered at her temples, slipping down to the hands that bore the stains of a life spent in engine bays. Hydraulic fluid darkened into scars, grease trapped beneath fingernails no amount of scrubbing could erase. At 34, she carried the grief of a widow and the iron will of a mechanic who kept airplanes alive long after their owners gave up on them. Today, though, she wasn't in the salvage yard for parts or overtime wages. She was here standing on trembling ground, staring across the lot toward something no rational person should want. A full Boeing 737 sitting abandoned like a fallen monument. Most folks avoided looking at it altogether, as if some shadow clung to its faded paint. But Maya couldn't look away. 3 weeks ago, she'd caught sight of it while driving to pick up her daughter, and the image had stuck to her mind like a bad dream with a pulse. A whole aircraft, engines attached, body intact, no airline markings, just sitting there, sunburned and forgotten. She didn't know whether destiny was calling her forward or warning her to run, but something in her gut whispered that this moment, this aircraft, would change everything she thought she knew about survival. The auctioneer's gravel-rough voice cut through the thick heat like a razor. Jack, sunburned and leathery as an old boot, stood on a platform built from mismatched pallets, trying to look authoritative despite the wobble beneath his feet. 20 or so bidders lingered in the dust, scrap dealers hunting aluminum, mechanics sniffing for parts, and dreamers chasing one more chance at fortune before the world closed its doors. Maya didn't know which category she belonged to anymore. Her bank account barely held $9,200, the scraped-together remains of 3 years of overtime shifts and sacrifices her 8-year-old daughter never fully understood. As Jack introduced the mysterious 737, he warned the crowd about its as-is-where-is state, its FAA hold, and the inexplicable legal mess surrounding its ownership. Silence followed, heavy and uneasy. When the bidding stalled at 5,000, then 4, then 3, Maya felt every instinct in her body fight itself, logic begging her to walk away, desperation pushing her forward. A man in a sharp suit finally lifted his hand, looking wildly out of place in the desert. His eyes slid over Maya like a blade, cold and assessing. When she raised her hand in response, his smile sharpened. The price climbed 6, 7, 8, 9,000, and then with her heart pounding loud enough to drown the desert wind, Maya whispered, 10,000. The man's expression changed. He stepped back without protest, but not without interest. And in that strange, silent retreat, Maya felt fate lean a little too close. 2 days later, after rearranging shifts, borrowing time from her mother, and pretending to be calm for Sophie's sake, Maya made her way north toward the abandoned airfield where the aircraft had first appeared nearly 15 years earlier. The road crumbled into dirt and stones, the desert stretching wide and unbroken, a reminder of how quickly civilization vanished outside city lines. When she rolled through the sagging gate of desert sky aviation, the silence hit her like a wall. No voices, no traffic, no hum of life, just the desert breathing and the faint cry of a distant hawk. There, at the far end of the sun-bleached runway, sat the 737, a ghost stranded far from its ocean of sky. Up close, its faded white paint seemed almost sorrowful, a relic that had watched years pass without purpose. Maya's mechanic mind switched on. Intact engines, minimal corrosion, stress cracks, but no catastrophic damage. None of it made sense. Even stripped for parts, the aircraft should have been worth far more than the price she'd paid. As she circled the fuselage, her fingers brushed over faint scratches near a cargo door, numbers etched with deliberate pressure. 327,698. She didn't yet know the meaning, but the moment she touched them, a chill slid down her spine. When she unlocked the cargo hold and shined her flashlight into the cool, cavernous belly of the aircraft, the space felt too clean, too intentional. Something had been hidden here, something someone cared enough about to seal behind a panel that didn't belong on any 737 she'd ever worked on. When the hidden compartment finally gave way beneath the drill and pry bar, the metallic snap echoed through the cargo hold like a gunshot fired in a church. Maya froze, breath held, as the panel swung open on disguised hinges, revealing a darkness that felt heavier than shadow. She lifted her flashlight, the beam trembling, and the world seemed to tilt off its axis. Inside the narrow chamber, neatly stacked, row after row, bundle after bundle, was cash. Not crumpled bills or loose currency, but organized bricks. Perfect stacks wrapped in paper bands, all hundreds. With hands that didn't feel like her own, she reached for the nearest bundle and counted the bills, each crisp and real beneath her fingertips. $10,000, and there were hundreds of stacks, maybe thousands. She tried to calculate, but her breath caught. The numbers ballooned too fast, millions upon millions. Enough to erase every worry, every sacrifice, every no she'd ever had to give her daughter. But with every breath in that suffocating cargo hold came another truth. Money like this didn't disappear into airplanes without blood attached. And people who hid fortunes didn't leave them behind willingly. Maya's phone buzzed in her pocket, breaking the spell. A text from her mother about Sophie scraping her knee. Life pulling her back from the edge of temptation. She took photos, closed the panel as best she could, and stepped into the desert sun trembling. She knew now that what lay inside that aircraft wasn't just money. It was danger wearing the mask of salvation. That evening, unable to sleep, Maya scoured old articles on a public library computer, unwilling to risk searching from home. The deeper she went, the colder her blood ran. A Federal Reserve facility robbed in 2003. $260 million missing, 4 masked thieves never identified. And beneath one of the earliest articles, the hotline number for tips, 327,698. The same numbers etched into the aircraft's paint like a scar left by someone who wanted the truth to whisper through time. Maya's hands shook as she clicked through page after page of abandoned leads, stalled investigations, theories involving cartels, insiders, and political cover-ups, all of them dead ends. By the time she shut the ancient computer down, her throat felt tight with dread. Someone had hidden that money in her aircraft. Someone with enough power to vanish a commercial plane, bury a federal case, and silence anyone who got too close. Suddenly, the man at the auction wasn't just a bidder, he was a warning. The black SUV that followed her home wasn't coincidence, it was surveillance, and the air around her seemed to tighten each time she looked over her shoulder. Maya realized she could no longer pretend she was simply a mechanic chasing a chance at a better life. She was now in possession of a secret that had cost people their lives. And somewhere out there, the ones who had buried that secret were watching, calculating what she knew and whether she was a threat worth eliminating. By the following morning, Maya's world had shrunk to a tight circle of fear, caution, and instinct. She needed help, someone who understood danger, who navigated shadows without getting swallowed by them. That person was Raymond Vega, an old friend of her late husband and a private investigator who specialized in aviation cases that insurance companies preferred to ignore. He met her in a rundown cafe that smelled of burnt coffee and old vinyl. His eyes, sharpening the moment she slid her phone across the table with photos of the cash-filled compartment. He listened without interrupting, jaw tightening as the pieces clicked together. "Maya," he whispered, leaning forward, "this isn't a simple theft. Whoever pulled off that heist had military-level logistics and government-level cover." His research over the next 2 days only cemented the nightmare. The aircraft had belonged to a Mexican businessman with cartel ties. His records were falsified. The plane supposedly scrapped. The lead FBI investigator had died suddenly, his suspicions buried with him. And the supervisor who shut down his reports now lived comfortably in retirement, too comfortably. When Maya told Raymond about the man in the suit lingering near her daughter, his expression darkened. "They're probing for weaknesses," he said, "trying to see how much pressure you can handle." Fear crawled up Maya's spine. "So what do I do?" Raymond's answer was simple, grim, and final. "You survive long enough to expose them, or long enough to disappear before they decide to make you disappear first." The danger tightened like a noose the moment Maya spotted the man in the suit again. This time inside the fluorescent aisles of a grocery store as her daughter reached for apples. His stare cut across the room with cold certainty, a silent message sent without a single word. "We can reach you anywhere." Maya abandoned her cart, grabbed Sophie's hand, and left without looking back. She drove to her mother's house on autopilot, fighting the rising tremor in her hands as Sophie asked why Mommy was scared. That night, Maya sat alone on her couch, the apartment quiet except for her heartbeat pounding against her ribs in frantic bursts. When the phone rang at 3 a.m., the unknown number chilled her before she even answered. The voice on the other end was calm, polite, even too polite. "Miss Torres, I represent people with a vested interest in the aircraft you recently acquired." Her throat tightened. I don't know what you mean. The voice chuckled softly. Please, denial insults both of us. When he mentioned Sophie by name, her school, her favorite playground, her age, Maya's blood turned to ice. They weren't threatening her. They were establishing dominance. They wanted the money and they wanted her silent. As the call ended, Maya stood in the dark living room, trembling. She knew then that the secret inside the aircraft was no longer just a hidden fortune. It was a countdown. Dawn crept through the blinds as Maya sat at her kitchen table, hands tight around a mug she wasn't drinking from. She realized the truth with a heaviness that settled deep into her bones. There was no safe choice left. Whether she called the FBI, met the men in the shadows, or tried to vanish, she was already inside a game built long before she ever stepped into that salvage yard. The aircraft she bought on desperation wasn't a project. It was a trap set years ago, waiting for someone unprotected enough to step into its path. And yet, somewhere beneath the fear and exhaustion, a different emotion stirred: defiance. She thought of Sophie's small hand tugging hers, her daughter's brave little voice insisting she wanted to fly like her father someday. Maya thought of Daniel, of his stubborn fearlessness, of the way he faced danger with a quiet courage she once mistook for recklessness. And she understood, survival wasn't just about running, it was about deciding what was worth protecting, what was worth fighting for. As the first rays of sun lit the horizon, Maya made her choice. She would not hand the truth back to the people who had buried it. She would not allow fear to dictate her daughter's future. She would stand, exposed and outmatched, but unbroken. Because some storms weren't meant to be avoided.